Coaching in Session,
your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
I don't know about you, but when it comes to trusting someone, it has to be built. Now, this is the old me. When I was in Connecticut, we just have a different mindset up north. We are New Englanders. We are nutmeggers. You know, if you're from Connecticut, you're a nutmegger. It sounds like a swear word a little bit, like when you say it, you're a nutmegger. But it's not a swear word. It's just kind of like you're a Texan or something along those lines. You're a Californian or whatever you want to consider other people from other places, right? Or Floridians. Right? Like that sounds more majestic, like you're an alien or something. But, I digress. We are going to be talking about the idea, the concept of trust. What is that, right? Now, when we think of trust, we think of a bond, maybe spoken or unspoken, that we do not want to be broken, that we don't want to have tarnished or, damaged, like whatever you want to consider trust, right? We want it to be perfect. But the reality is sometimes trust is going to go through some challenges, right? Because maybe someone is given something and maybe they just kind of speak out of line because they had a rough day, a rough moment. And I know this is not an excuse, but it is all too common. So we have to look at what trust is truly, right? Trust is going to be defined exactly by you. Because you might trust someone who stabs someone else in the back, but, says they won't stab you in the back. But if I see someone stabbing someone else in the back, I'm not going to trust them, even if they don't stab me in the back, right? Because we all have the potential to do bad things in life. We also have the potential to do good things. And I say a man's word is everything. And a man, I say, it could be a woman too. That word is everything. Person's word is everything. And so if they renege on that word or they go back on that word or they think there's a clever way around it, then the trust is already beginning to dismantle. It's beginning to dissipate. I like to think of trust as a thin piece of toilet paper, right? And it's going to be like the thinnest one, like Scott's or something, right? Or like Charmin's, I think it's like 2-ply or something. And it might be a little bit thicker. But if you put it in water, eventually it dissolves. And that is what happens with trust, right? You might say, oh, I'm going to trust you and everything's going to be good. And maybe it just happens automatically because someone else trusts them and maybe it works out. But then I think about maybe stories of how the gingerbread man was running away from a young age and he trusted the fox to take him across the river because he couldn't get wet himself or he would dissolve just like that toilet paper, as I was saying. But yet the gingerbread man got eaten by the fox, right? He trusted the fox in a sense, right? And it was his demise. And we have to make sure we're not allowing the snakes or the foxes or whoever can be out to harm us or eat us alive to get that close. So we have to understand and be able to discern what is truly trust. And so I have this article here, Understanding Trust, How It's Built, Broken, and Who Truly Deserves It. And in this article, you're going to find that trust is going to be the most powerful foundation for any relationship that you're trying to build. Now, when we look at trust as the word, trust is not something that really can be seen, right? Trust is built in the mind. Now, trust can be shown. For example, hey, I want you to fall backwards, right? We call it a trust fall. And either I catch you or I don't catch you. And I'm sure people have seen videos or maybe even been there in moments when they were supposed to do a trust fall and the person fell forward instead of backwards. Who was the person at fault? The person who fell the wrong way or the person who didn't catch them? And this is what trust is, right? It can be confusing because we might say, I was under the impression that we had to do this versus we had to do that. And now one person feels as if they've been betrayed while the other person feels as if they were doing the right thing while the other person had their own agenda. Can we go against someone else's agenda and say, hey, you are doing things that are not helpful, right? You're making it more difficult to do things. I think of like if someone is working backwards. For example, let's say I'm digging a hole because I want to plant a tree and my dog is over here throwing dirt into the hole, or my kid is throwing dirt into the hole that where I'm digging. Eventually, at some point, I'm going to snap. And it's not that I don't trust him. It's just that we're not working in unison. The goal is to dig a hole, not to put dirt in the hole. When it comes to trust, the idea of trust is to make it stronger, not weaker. So we have to look at what is the objective. Oftentimes, the objective of trust is to kind of have something out of sight, out of mind, to allow the mind to understand that you're in a safe area, right? Most people, they want to feel trusted when they're in certain places like work or home or at school, whatever it be. They want to feel a level of trust, and that trust is typically linked to security. So I want to feel safe and secure. I trust that I'm going to be safe and I'm going to be secure. I trust that people are maybe going to challenge me, of course, right? That's not a break of trust. But some people think that, if you object them, that trust is a betrayal, right? Like you're betraying me because you're not on my side. And that is not what trust is, right? I would rather someone tell me I'm doing wrong things and bad things than to be led on my whole life thinking I was doing the right thing. Because a villain might not truly understand that they're a villain unless they can see their evil acts and say, how is this helping? Some people, they just have missions and goals in life because they have objectives. Villains, I think of villains, they have a goal, right? Maybe it's to rob a bank, right? Yeah, of course it's against the law, but the objective is money, right? I'm going to get some money. I'm going to do something. And maybe they're going to be like Robin Hood. Robin Hood was a robber, right? But yet he's not a villain. Yet he's a good guy, right? He stole stuff. Same thing as that villain stole things from the bank. But yet we villainize the villain who stole from the bank, and we, promote Robin Hood who stole from the rich. The banks are rich. And all of this is a mindset now, because we're looking at how we can say one person is good and one person is bad, one person is a hero, one person is a villain. How can I trust this person if they're doing the same thing? So we have to think in opposites now. And the reality is we cannot be thinking in a two-tone factor when it comes to trust. We can't say that, okay, if you are my brother or my sister, if you do this, I can trust you. And then all of a sudden someone else does the opposite, and then you say, I'm still going to trust you, right? You need to be very clear, very similar to your values on what trust is for you and what can build and what can break that trust. We can get into me in a little bit of how I build trust and how I look at broken trust, but I think we need to look at the article first so we can kind of get a guidepost for helping you decide what you need to do when it comes to trust and building that. So when you're building trust, it involves several key things, and there's going to be 5 things you need to worry about or look at. 1 is the consistency. Easy enough. 2, honesty. 3, the vulnerability aspect to it. 4, respect. And 5, the empathy aspect. Now, all of these are the elements to build trust. Now, you might not think about 3 out of the 5 things when trust is being built, especially empathy, especially respect, and maybe vulnerability, right? It can even be consistency, trade for vulnerability, depending on your mindset, right? Because you might have grown up in a very dark place where people betrayed people, backstabbing all the time. And you know what will happen? You think this is the norm. You think that's common. And so when you grow up with that common, negative type of upbringing, you might say, okay, well, where am I going to be looking at it? Maybe it's going to be consistency, and maybe it's going to be either vulnerability or honesty, depending on how you're looking at it, right? Respect might not be there. But when we look at trust to be like truly good, right? Like full trust, we're looking at these 5 aspects. Now, the consistency part, it makes sense, right? I trust that you're going to do the right thing at all times. Think of marriage. You get married, you make a vow till death do you part. You're not going to go out and fornicate with others, but yet it happens, right? So you weren't consistent, right? You said, hey, I'm going to, take out the trash every Monday, right? And I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And eventually that trust is broken because something happens. Now, of course, there's going to be situations where you might not be able to take out the trash, right? But there's not going to be situations where you fell in the bed with someone and had intercourse with them because what happened? We were just at the same bar and something happened, right? If you think about last week, right? You were attracted to them, you felt some level of affection, but you weren't connected to them. Is that cheating? And I know people, they will say that it's not cheating if there's no connection, but it is, right? Like let's be real. So consistency, right? Doing the things when you have to do them at all times, not sometimes, not when you feel like it, at all times. Now, sometimes that can break, but when we look at the forgiveness aspects, we can look at the consistency aspect also. We have to be consistent. We have to be someone who is solid, right? Typically, when you get in your car, you want it to start, right? You push the button or you turn the key. You want your car to start. You want that consistency. And the same thing is true in any relationship you have. You want your relationships to be built on that trust, the same trust as if you get in the car and it can take you from A to B. And of course, you need to understand what that type of friendship is or relationship is, because you might have people who are ride or die people, and you might have people who are just your emotional support groups. And you need to understand where they are on that spectrum, because you just can't say, hey, my best friend, I'm going to ask them for money. They're not your bank teller. So if they don't give you money, can you say you don't trust them? All of this is to be said, right? There's many factors that need to be looked at when it comes to what type of friends and relationships you want to have, and then what does trust mean for you and them. And then we look at number 2, honesty, right? Honesty is maybe the most easy one to understand, but it is maybe the one that is going to be the hardest one to commit to long term, because a little white lie here or there never hurt anybody, right? Well, it does. Because someone might say, hey, going back to the money thing, I need some money to pay my rent, but yet they're going on a vacation next week. And you might say, wait 1 second, you're going on a vacation and I'm over here slaving away. You said you needed some help with rent, and I want to do that for you because I believe that you would do that for me, right? Guess what? Now that honesty is starting to break down. It's like, what are you truly using that money for? Oh, I did need money for the rent. Okay, great. But then why are you going on trips if you need help? And so now it's a battle of critical thinking and common sense, where you might say, is this person just using you, or is this person just not financially literate and they don't know how to balance their money? Both are not good for a long lasting friendship, because a friendship should not be dependent on 2 people relying on someone. It should be 2 individuals that are confident in themselves and are able to sustain themselves, and that they can go into a relationship or they can go into a friendship and both people just kind of embellish someone. I'm here to support you, but then again, it's just like a neck, right? Your neck can hold up your head, but how many kids are holding their head that, on their desks in school or whatever it be? You have a neck for a reason, meaning you're able to support yourself. So you take people who can support themselves and you bring them together and you have a good time. You build the friendships. And then, of course, there might be moments when you test their trust or something like that. Hey, can you take me to the airport? My car broke down. Can you pick me up? Something along those lines, right? That can build connection and that can build trust. And you're just honest about everything that you do. There's no snakes. There's no ulterior motive. There's no talking behind your backs. I can't tell you how many people are two-faced when it comes to, hey, you should trust me because I'm a family member. Just because you're family doesn't mean anything. Because most family members will be dishonest with you more than the person who's trying to rob you on the street. At least they're telling you what they want. Then we get into 3, vulnerability. Vulnerability is the aspect of, can I be vulnerable and trust someone maybe with my most intimate feelings and ideas? I think of when people, they come for coaching, they have to be vulnerable to me, right? They're telling me everything that's wrong, not just some, like typically is everything. We go into detail. And I just imagine, just being on the other end, how difficult could that be to trust someone, especially someone you have just met? And of course, you could have listened to the podcast a little bit and maybe just consultation, and you worked with me a little bit. But when a new problem, arises, you might say, what would Mike think of me if I said or I did this? And the reality is, the trust that I have, with a client is you could tell me anything. You could tell me you robbed the bank. It's fine. Okay. But at the end of the day, I'm going to look at it as, do we want to keep going down this road? Because we're going to look at the pros and cons for everything you tell me. We look at the pros. Yeah, sure. We get some quick money, right? But the cons, maybe we're going to go in jail for a long time. Do you want to risk that? Like, is it worth it? Of course, I'm no snitch. I'm not going to tell the cops, and the cops call me and they're going to say, did this person confess that they robbed the bank? I'm going to say, officer, I don't know what you're talking about. That's it. That's the reality. I'm not going to break a client confidentiality type of conversation, right? You tell me something, that's it. All right. If you tell me something and I say I'm going to do it, that's it. I'm going to do it. There's no, I'm not feeling like it today. My car broke down. My dog died. So, something happened in my life. It doesn't matter. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to commit to it. Now, of course, there's going to be times when you pivot, sometimes when you have to make some adjustments. I'm not saying that everything is going to be perfect, but I'm saying that you need to be deliberate in how you do things. Because anyone can say they're going to do something, right? A parent says, oh, I'll see you at the music concert, or I'll see you at the festival. And the kid is looking for the parent, and the parent never shows up. And guess what happens? The kid comes home and kid is down. They're sad, they're depressed. And, maybe the parent sees that and they bring up the conversation first because the kid might not bring it, right? The kid's already upset. They're going to not say, hey, where were you? Like, why'd you not show up? And maybe if your kid was, more courageous, and maybe if your kid was, someone who was strict like that, or stern like that, or was strong like that, they might say something. But oftentimes it's going to be the parent that initially says something. Hey, sorry, bud, work was so crazy, I couldn't make it. They might say, okay, I understand, whatever, right? Don't make a promise you can't keep with children, because now they're going to start to not ask you for things. And this is where a lot of the teen problems come, where you tell them something and it doesn't happen. And they're like, okay, well, what's the point of even asking mom or dad or something like that? The trust is broken. And when you have that trust broken with teens, oh my goodness, you got some big problems. Okay. So you're better off just being that beacon to listen and not like lose your mind. Same thing as with a client. They tell you something, you're like, okay, I understand. All right, this is where we are. Let's figure out what we do next. All right. There's a great book about parenting. In the book, the author talks about what he does with his children when they have something big to tell them. And there's like a code word, and you can choose your own code word, right? It can be, hey, dad, I want to talk about, cotton candy today. And the dad will know that cotton candy is the key word for dad. I want to talk to you about something, and I can't have you be upset because I'm telling you this. And then the dad knows, even though he wants to lose it, even if he wants to flip out and start cussing and everything, guess what? He won't, because he understands that he cannot, because the trust that is in that code word, that is in the conversation, is going to be built on, let's figure this out together, not me berate you because I'm sure you already feel insecure about this. All of this is to be said that we need to get into number 4, which is respect, where both parties can understand and respect one another. No one wants to be yelled at. No one wants to be ridiculed. No one wants to be betrayed. Respect is a given. And when that respect is broken, and it might seem so insignificant to the other person because they don't see it sometimes, it's a big deal. Respect can come in many different shapes and sizes. Respect can be, hey, we're supposed to go to the gym and you're not showing up to the gym. Like, what's happening, right? Well, whatever happened, right? Sure. Maybe you're having a conversation with them and they keep interrupting you, right? The respect is not there, right? Like, you're not telling people that you're not showing up or something like that. So it's also a mix of no consistency. And then you're also, like belittling someone and things along those lines. So you're losing respect, right? And it can just be that sharp thing. And I can imagine, like, for example, this happens quite a bit with employees and bosses. The boss might say something like this: I'm the boss, you do what I tell you. I'm the boss, I pay your check, you're going to do what needs to be done. I don't care how long you have to work, get it done. Okay? Well, guess what? The respect is not there, right? because now they're going to feel as if they're just a pawn, a piece of the puzzle, right? Just another cog in the wheel. And so the respect aspect is going to be out the window so quick. And then you're going to wonder why you don't like that job anymore, because you don't feel respected. You don't feel appreciated. That's why when it comes to executives and leadership, you need to look at more than just the surface level stuff. Last part, 5, empathy. We all know that people are going to have ups and downs in life. I know there's people who are going to have money problems. I know there's people who are going to be dealing with some type of loss or grief in their life. And I'm not expecting them to, during that moment to be consistent and to not be vulnerable or something along those lines. I'm going to expect them to be human. I understand what is happening. And so I need to be putting myself in people's shoes, not to walk in them, but to understand them. Because I might not understand what a person that is going through divorce is feeling, but I can understand what a person is going through if they lost someone, but it won't be the same exact thing because my upbringing is different than their upbringing. So we have to look at things through a lens. And so it's not the lens of me being a scientist and I'm going to take like a microscope and I'm going to say, let me look at everything in fine detail and let me start to fix things for you or to, make things, very clear for you to understand. No. This is for me to say, hey, I see, right? And, that might take some time to heal. And with time, great, things get better. But if not, then we look at the alternatives. If a person is not showing up and they're not doing what they need to do for a long period of time, or they're not being consistent and maybe they're lying about things, and, the trust is going to slowly start to dissipate. And maybe that's going to lead to a friendship that is going to be forgotten. Can't tell you how many friends that were once there that are no longer there. And it's not that they're bad people. It's just that there was a moment where one of these 5 areas, there was a fracture. And then I had to make a choice. Do I choose to fix this fracture, to kind of forget the fracture, or to say, you know what, let's move on? And so there's an aspect in this article also where I'm talking about if you have trusted someone and you want to forgive them, where I believe you have to, do a full nosedive in if you have to, retrust a person. I know this can sometimes happen with like children and their parents, for example, or adultery in relationships. Like those are big ones where they might say, why do I have to trust you? And I couldn't trust you when I needed you the most. Or why do I have to trust you when you can't even be consistent and honest with me and make, and uphold your promises? All of this is to be said that you have a choice to make. Are you going to allow that trust that was broken to be reforged and built again? Or are you going to say that this betrayal is always going to be on my mind and is something that cannot be forgiven? Well, if you are a bigger person than me, you can just forgive every single one who does harm to you and doesn't have your best interest in mind, and you are being used, but yet you keep on forgiving. Hey, I'm not here to say how you should live life. I'm just here to say, well, maybe if you look at these areas, you can either forgive better or you can maybe not forgive at all. Well, communicate openly. You have to have a conversation about what happened. You have to have a conversation of where things went wrong. And of course, if both parties or if one party is like, no, then of course, that nothing can happen. And so basically, there's no bridge that can be connected without support. If one person doesn't want to be the connector, then we already know that no matter how much open communication we have, we're not going to be able to connect again. Then we look at boundaries, setting boundaries. Maybe you set boundaries, you're like, hey, don't do this. I know early on, I was thinking about this earlier today, actually. It was funny. I was at the gym and I was like, I remember when like she yelled at me or something, like my wife, when we're in the talking stages. And I was like, I don't like to be yelled at, one of those things like ego. But then I said, you know what? That wasn't her yelling at me. It was her setting a boundary. And so I was like, okay, now I know that's a boundary, right? That's a minefield. All right. Don't go there. And so I don't go there, right? There's things I don't say. There's things that I don't do because I have learned. So I know I can cross boundaries. I know I can use all the things she says, to me or about someone, and I can push it right in her face. But I don't, right? Because why in the world am I going to do that? Because I'm just going to be crossing the boundary, right? It makes no sense. So we have to understand that there might be certain things that, of course, we can leverage against someone to kind of win an argument. But just because we won the argument, we also won, like a path in one direction to no friendship anymore. Then we look at the assessing the willingness to change. For example, if someone is saying, this happened and, I'm so sorry this happened, it won't happen again. And, they're really sincere about that, then sure, right? We can look at it as this is a real, apology. But then maybe they apologize just like I said, but then they do it again and they do it again and they do it again. And you're like, what's happening? So the willingness is not there. Because if you do something once and you say, I'm not going to do it again, you don't do it again. I understand there's people who kind of fall into substances and drugs and things along those lines. Of course, it happens. I'm not saying it doesn't. There could be a relapse, and yeah, sure. You have to look at it long term, right? Especially if it's something that's hard to overcome. It might not take a week. It might not take a month. It might not even take a year. But if they're consistent and not showing up year after year after year after year, there's something bigger. There's something wrong. They're not willing to make the change, because change is going to be something a person has to make, and it takes anywhere from 3 to 9 months. That's how long it takes. And if it doesn't happen within that time span and it keeps on reoccurring, they do not really want to change. Now, of course, you can walk away, leave, dismantle the relationship, whatever it be. And they might say, oh my God, I'm so sorry I lost you. Well, guess what? You can go back and try to fix things, or you can say you had your time and keep on moving. It just depends on what type of person you are. And then, 5 is basically the aspect of choosing to forgive but not forget. I don't like that aspect, because now you're just kind of keeping things very similar to like a broken plate. Like you fix a broken plate and you're always going to have this broken plate, and you're just like, man, that broken plate's still there. Because if you had to use another plate in your cabinet, would you use a broken one, or would you use a one that's not broken and chipped and cracked? The reality is you would use a pristine one. And I'm not saying that you throw away all your broken dishes and you throw away all your broken relationships. What I'm telling you is that if there's a hiccup in a relationship, right, and you choose to fix it rather than to throw it away, you have to also throw away this idea of what they did. Now, not saying you forget and like, oh yeah, like this is the first time this happened. It's like, no. We know this has happened before, but it's not something that you ruminate on. And that's the key. You cannot ruminate on what they have done. Literally, they do it. You never bring it up again. And you kind of just go through life. Maybe, for the conversation, you say something like, if it happens again, that's it. I'm not going to think about it. You're not going to think about it. We're not going to talk about it. And we're going to keep on moving with our life. That's it. If they make the change, great. If they don't, you know that they weren't willing. And then number 6, move on if necessary. Now, you might not know in the beginning if you need to get rid of a relationship. It is very simple to get rid of someone. They might call you or text you or feel obligated to continue with the agenda that they have been kind of going. It can happen in relationships where you always call your significant other, and then all of a sudden you're not together anymore. But then again, guess what you're going to do? You're going to give them a call. Sometimes I have clients and they're going through divorces and they're going through all these hardships. And I'm saying, listen, I understand what you're going to do, because I understand mindset extremely well. And you're going to try to call them, right? You're going to try to have a conversation with them. And you're going to learn that that was a mistake. And I always tell them, when you want to call them, you call me, right? I'll talk to you, right? We could talk about your emotions and things like that. But sure enough, they do it. And then they call me or text me the next time we have our meeting or whatever. They say, Mike, you're right. I go, I know I'm right. I know, because it happens every single time. We have to do better. Move on if necessary, right? And the moving on doesn't mean that you move on forever. It can mean that you move on in a direction for yourself for a bit, and you get to make a choice if you want to kind of look back and, bring them next to you again, right? You get to bring them up to, like with you again. I have a very simple process for this. Who were they before and who are they today? Because maybe they were a person that was stressed out and anxious and maybe not the best mindset. But then, sure enough, right, with time, they mature, they change. You can begin that relationships again, right? And look at building trust again. But it is a personal preference. It is a choice, and you get to make that choice. Do you want to build trust that might have been lost and forgotten or maybe broken? Or do you kind of just want to say that, we had our moment, we had our time, and it was great. It was a great learning lesson for both of us. And so now we know we won't make that same mistake again. And that's what happens oftentimes with trust. Trust is not something that whereas everything is perfect and we make no mistakes. It's just sometimes we make mistakes with other people, so we know not to make them again with other people. So if I make a mistake with an ex-girlfriend or something, I might not make it with a new girlfriend or a wife or whatever, right? And the same thing is true for you. You might not make the same mistake with a boss or a colleague or a son or a daughter or child or whatever. You are learning what trust is, how to show it, how to, bring it about, and then how other people can perceive it, because it's important that people understand what trust is. And this is why this article here is so important. Understanding trust, how it's built, broken, and who truly deserves it. Because when we're reading through this article, we're going to learn about all of these different things about trust, how to make it and how to build it, and then to look at if someone should come back in our life. And the reality is you have to basically have a feeling that, this person is a person that you will love to have in your life, good or bad. Times are not always going to be beautiful and always going to be good. And sometimes in those bad times, right, when we have people who we can trust, right, we have people who are going to be consistent and we're confident in, it creates a long lasting type relationship. And I say, for example, best friends. You can go years without talking to a best friend, but then the moment you two reunite, family members or whatever, it's like you just pick up where you guys left off. There's a lot of curiosities, like what's been going on, and it's all love, it's all appreciation. There's no competitive nature. There's no, I'm doing this now, you're still doing that. Oh, you poor thing or something like that. It's all of this time and where you are. I'm going to appreciate where you are because I'm sure your journey has been yours. Right. And that's just a way to say of that everyone in life is going to have their own unique way of living. Some people are going to be extremely successful. Some people are going to maybe take their time or be roundabout about it. And maybe they will never be truly successful in the terms of money or materialistic goods, but maybe they have found fulfillment in life. And so we're trusting with another person, who we are, our identity. And this is one of the reasons why many people, they join like-minded organizations or groups because they find people who are going to accept them. And of course, that trust is basically of, well, if you're like me, then you must think like me. And I feel as if I like to trust people that are very similar to me because it feels good. It feels like home. It feels normal, right? And that's what we want at the end of the day. We want to feel as if we're loved and we're appreciated. And trust is going to be one of those things that are formed in the process. And all of this is to say that, trust is going to be multifaceted. You have to figure out what trust is for you, how it's built, and what can break that trust. Because what can break trust for me might be different than what can break trust for you. Because you can get a hammer and try to chip a ice block away, or you can get a mallet, like a rubber mallet, and try to chip that same block of ice. Which one is going to be more effective, right? Both are hammers, but one is going to be, have a softer hammer. And all of this is to say that, when you're trying to figure out, trust, you have to figure out what is right for you. And if you figure out that a person who's does this is not a person you can trust, and that you don't have to go down that road or begin those relationships with those people. And I'm not saying that you create echo chambers of like-minded organizations and groups all the time, because you might find yourself that a person that is completely opposite to you that you can also trust, because trust is not only an affiliation, it's a mindset. And the mindset typically is going to come from an upbringing, from characters and values, all mixed together to create what trust truly is. You get to know a person by either the words they say or the actions that they do. If you get really good, you start to pay attention to the things that don't happen in between the lines. And then you can say, this is a person I can trust, or this is a person that I don't think is going to be a good fit for me. You get to make a choice who's in your circle at the end of the day.